Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podcast Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. I'm very excited to introduce Lauren Koch as our guest on today's episode. Lauren is an interdisciplinary artist and classically trained musician who I'm sure many of you already know, but if you do not know her yet, I'm thrilled for you to get a chance to do so now through this conversation. Lauren, thank you for being willing to chat with me about life and the role that cast iron plays in your artwork. Hearing how you persevered through the adversity of the pandemic, through the final stages of your MFA degree, demonstrates that you have an amazing capacity to achieve your goals. Also, I find it remarkable to hear about the way you're creating a career that draws on all of your strengths and passions. The Podcast Iron Show is sponsored in part by supporters on Patreon. Thank you to everyone who's joined as a Patreon member so far to help me afford the production costs of this show. And I'm so honored to say that this episode is brought to you by our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, which is a national center for iron casting and metal art. For more information about the Sloss Metal Art program, visit their website, which is slossmetalarts.com. Now, for all of you listening or watching, thanks so much for tuning in, and please enjoy. Lauren Koch, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Welcome to the Podcast Iron.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's just start as is tradition. Well, Lauren, who the hell are you anyways?
Well, I am a multi-passionate artist and musician. I am a creative mindfulness facilitator and an advocate of self-care. But in most of my real life, I am a graphic designer and the creative director at Riverworks Art Center here in Poolesville, Maryland.
So, question number 2, let's just get right down to it. Let's talk about any childhood memories or your formative years where maybe you had some introduction to, you already told me that they play a really big role in who you became today. So I'm not even going to prompt you anymore. Let's just get right to it. So Tell me all about it.
It's really big role. I was actually homeschooled completely K through 12. And so I was pretty much, besides my curriculum, I was kind of allowed to direct my own interest and stuff. So not only was I classically trained in piano, which was my choice, and then I was always in art classes, ceramics, painting, all kinds of varieties. But probably the most important thing, we would always go to historical sites and state parks that would have blacksmiths and butter churning and all kinds of things during these really cool festivals. When I was 13, I was introduced to iron pouring.
13?
Yeah. So I've been iron pouring for 21 years now.
That's unbelievable to me. 13. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did that?
We went by Red Top Mountain State Park in North Georgia. It's Cartersville, Georgia. And we were invited to come back the next day because they were like, we're going to have this big, they have like a possum trot cabin up on top of the hill, and they have interpreters there. But the big draw was their biannual, twice a year, iron pour. And so they're like, come back, you're artsy, come back, do scratch blocks. And of course, that was, a definite. We were going back. It was my birthday, it was like, okay, this is going to be awesome. And so went back the next day and we hung out, met a bunch of the guys from Tanny Hill and Sloss.
Oh, wow.
And so then immediately, every time they hosted one, I was going back. And it moved from me volunteer, just doing my own scratch blocks, to volunteering in the scratch block tent, to then getting asked to be on the pour floor. So it was really awesome.
That's so much fun. So just tell me more about that. I'm super interested. Do you remember, or is it do you still know the people that were like, who was running the furnace?
Um, Most of them were, some of them were state park employees,
Okay.
and later on it started like changing over to Kennesaw State, which was just a little farther south. Paige Birch is there.
Yeah.
So I actually lost touch when I started college at University of West Georgia. I lost touch with a lot of those people because I wasn't able to go and show up the same way. And so I went back like my final semester, I guess, 2016. Yeah, I think it was like 2015, 2016 that I went back and ended up running into a bunch of the Kennesaw students and some of the people that kind of remembered me. Of course, some of the state park people had changed, but it was just really cool. And then, going to Kennesaw for some of their iron pours and stuff like that, and just running into, oh, I got my start at Red Top too, and now I work for the National Park System, or stuff like that. It's just been really cool following some of those stories along the way.
Awesome. Do you remember, like, do you still have your first scratch blocks?
Oh yeah, my mom does. She has all of those, and now we have tons across the house, like on all the eaves and stuff on
Uh-huh.
the
So do you
molding.
want to go right into West Georgia? You want to
Yeah,
just go,
totally.
is that too much of a jump from childhood to
Not really, because it just like I stayed very much in the arts and humanities all through high school. I started going more into folk music, expanding from classical piano into guitar and mountain dulcimer and stuff. So when I wasn't at iron pour festivals, I was at mountain dulcimer festivals and stuff like that. So right before I started undergrad, I actually started going to John C. Campbell Folk School.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Brasstown, North Carolina, and that's where I was trained as a blacksmith
Oh,
predominantly. And now I teach there occasionally for printmaking and stuff like that. But it's a really cool school. If if y'all haven't found it, it's a lot like Penland or Aramont.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, in undergrad, I went to the University of West Georgia. I actually applied for classical music and was
Oh,
accepted and didn't even start art to begin with. But it was the first semester I was there. I was just getting into my core classes
yeah.
and stuff. And I marched myself down the first week to the art department and put my painting application in
Okay.
because that was the safe thing to do.
What do
I
you
had
mean?
already been doing iron pours and stuff, but I thought that, having the classical music degree, I had to not go the sculpture route
Oh, okay.
just to protect my hands and stuff like that.
I understand now. Okay. I understand by safe. I didn't know what you meant. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was pretty much it. And I actually had worse injuries from playing piano like 6 hours a day
Yeah.
than I ever have had from iron pouring, but that's beside the
Yeah.
point.
Knock on wood. Well, knock on wood.
Yeah,
I just did.
exactly.
But yeah, that's a really interesting um aspect that I don't know if I've ever thought about that before. Anyway, so you put in your application for
Uh-huh.
painting.
Yeah, and I then ping ponged between, you know, that art ed, printmaking, which I had been exposed to for longer than the iron casting.
Hmm.
I probably like 8 years old or something I had been printmaking from. So I had sort of settled in that, and here I'm still trying to force myself through. I knew I wasn't fitting into the classical music realm, but it was, still very impactful and everything. But I knew my passion was in art. I went on a study abroad with the chair of the art department to Finland, and we were I knew he was starting a project because I worked in the art office at that time. And I knew that they were starting a bronze casting project that was actually going to be our school mascot. And so he's having to deal with all the logistics of that while we're in Finland. And then we come back. And almost immediately, as soon as we got home, I kept going down there, sneaking out of lithography class, or out from the office, like, can I take the paper to get signed? And I'd sneak in there, and like they finally gave me clay. We were using plasticine, and they're like, here, why don't you try sculpting this fur, And it was natural. And I immediately that fall transferred everything over. I ended my music degree
Mhm.
and just stepped away from it. Because I was struggling, like I said, with the tendonitis and stuff like that, and was having a
Mm.
lot of issues. And um, just I went full-fledged printmaking and sculpture from that time on, and just found my groove. It was awesome. Definitely, we're West Georgia wolves, so it was our wolf pack for sure, and that's the sculpture crowd.
What kind of work were you making then at that time?
I was pretty much working on like family based, like heritage stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
still you'll see pop up within my work, but it was mostly like natural colorants and trying to figure out sort of how I wanted to use craft as a fine art. That was sort of what I was exploring at that time. And I had, basic ceramics classes and, intro to sculpture and stuff. So I was starting to take and meld all of those things. And as soon as we got done and I went full sculpture, I started rest printing like immediately. And so that really has propelled me in the past like 5 years or something, is doing the Traces Beauty exhibition at the ICCIA in Scranton,
Mm-hmm.
and like tons and tons of workshops. And so I think that was like when I started blending the printmaking and the sculpture side of things, that was what really gave me the confidence to be like, hey, you're good. Like, you understand what's going on. You're doing something that's a little different than everybody else. And then during that whole entire time, I was honing my mold making skills, like resin bonded sand and the ceramic shell. I hate ceramic shell, but that's beside the point.
Okay. I mean, I have and I've admitted this before on the podcast, so I guess I can again, but I actually have no experience with ceramic shell,
Really?
and I'm a little intimidated, which means I should probably take a workshop.
Yeah, it's definitely worth learning. Gating systems and dealing with trying to weld the wax together and stuff can be a
Oh,
nightmare.
yeah.
And then they can just pop off if the ceramic shells too. And so you might be three dips in and lose the gating system or something like that. And
That
it's
sounds awful.
yeah.
But I also have seen that one can receive amazing results from that.
Absolutely.
That maybe
Yeah.
would be harder to actually get that same thing in sand. So pros and cons to
Yeah.
everything, right?
But I would personally, I would prefer to make a 15-part sand mold
Mm.
than use the ceramic shell. But Katie Hovenkamp, she before I started this latest project I'm working on, she told me that she uses shellac to coat her waxes,
Oh,
and it pops off so much easier. So that saved me a lot of like sandblasting and stuff like that. So little
nice,
trick.
nice, nice tip. Yeah. All right. So do you want to then move on from undergrad, or is there anything else you want to talk about? I feel like we're moving right
Yeah,
along.
we're
Two
chugging.
what?
We're chugging.
Yeah, we're two ladies with a mission. So then what happened after uh bachelor's?
Okay, so after bachelor's, I took a gap year. Um, I was accepted to Franconia and Salem Art Works at the same time. So I had a big decision to make with that. And I ended up deciding Salem Art Works because I was actually planning to tour some of the colleges in that area to figure out if I wanted to apply for grad school or not. And it lined up with the Pittsburgh International Sculpture Conference at Carrie Furnace and stuff. And it just, that was one of the most enjoyable experiences. If y'all haven't checked out Salem Artworks, it's really awesome. It's like 100 and something acre dairy farm that's been transformed into a sculpture park and everything. At that time, I actually let the foundry assistant application pass before I applied. So I went in purely as just a regular resident artist, as like emerging artist in residence. So I was supposed to be weed eating and upkeeping the sculpture park and stuff like that. And the first week or so, I met Bones, Michael Bonadeo. He was one of the old Sloss crew with Julie Ward and everybody. And him and the gal that was supposed to be the foundry assistant weren't quite mingling too well together, and
happens.
She was more like small castings and bronze and centrifugal, casters and stuff like that. So we got to talking, and she preferred to be in the still shop. So they transferred us, they switched us. And so I became the foundry assistant and spent all fall hanging out with Bones. And just after my residency, we ended up traveling to Steelyard, Alfred, Carrie Furnace happened, and it was a phenomenal fall. Just really, really cool. And then I immediately flew to Scottsdale, Arizona for the Western Conference. So it was like a full fall of, I think I had more iron pours in 4 months than I had in like at least the last 5 years prior to that. So it was incredible.
What a dream.
Right.
Yeah. So did that help you decide where you wanted to go after that?
It actually didn't. I ruled out all of the colleges I went to go see. I was looking at Penn State, Alfred, ASU out in Arizona. There was a lot that I was checking out, and I actually met John Rupert in Pittsburgh during the conference. We were hanging out together quite a bit, and he told me about University of Maryland. And there was a couple of the undergrad and grad students at Salem Artworks. I hadn't really been thinking about it, and something just kept telling me, hey, you need to. John was pretty cool. They've got the largest cast iron furnace on the East Coast, academic furnace. Go check it out. And so I ended up applying there and to Bones, Michael Bonadeo's undergrad school, Morgantown, West Virginia. Sight unseen, just went on a whim. And so I did a tour up and visited both of the schools that spring and ended up going with University of Maryland.
So tell me how that rolled it, and was it specifically with iron casting and sculpture?
Yeah, it's a very interdisciplinary department, so you can basically do whatever you want. They had me predominantly teaching printmaking classes, but I also assisted with steel and the iron casting. But it was very heavy on iron. Every semester we would have a big iron pour. Michael Thrawn, he also went to Salem Artworks and a couple of the other residencies and stuff, and we came in together. We had our paths crossed multiple times, but it was just, one of those relationships that you just like, you're part of my crew, and you always gravitate, like everybody's family in the iron casting community, but then you have those tight, close knit. And that's how I ended up hooking up with Christian Benefiel and the Shepherd University crew out in West Virginia. Christian was an alumni at University of Maryland, I had actually met a couple of his students at Sloss in 2017, um, but lost touch, didn't really, have any contact with them. And this little chipper girl just comes up, I'm running this huge furnace and she's like right at my shoulder. And I'm like, okay, her voice, everything sounds familiar, but with the big mask and everything on, you don't really know, especially if you don't know their leathers. And it was Alyssa Imes. She was like, "You don't remember me, do you?" And so she was at undergrad at at Shepherd University, and one of Christian's students, and it was like an immediate. So like they would come at that time. I didn't have a car or anything. They would come get me. We'd go to Newport News or out to West Virginia and all kinds of stuff. And that's how, like, between Mike Thrawn and the Shepherdstown crew, it was just like
Just
immediate.
click.
Yeah.
So, do you want to, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about grad school and like what you were making at that time, or
Yeah, I can go into that.
only if you want to, I mean, we can.
Yeah, no, it's fine because my
Okay.
my art did change quite a bit.
Okay.
So in grad school, I started actually going bigger with a lot of my cast iron work. We did have a bigger muller. Of course, we had 1,000-pound tapping furnace. So I was like, I'm going to pour at least 800 pounds, 500 pounds, whatever. And so I started having either series or like larger pieces. But at the same time, I had hit my limit of being a pack mule because I'd been doing it pretty much my whole entire life. And come to find out, I had scoliosis and all kinds of stuff. So that took me on that like self care and mindfulness journey and like trying to regain everything because I went from being able to walk through DC 13, 18 miles a day and then, pick up huge pieces of cast iron to not even being able to stand up or walk very far. And that was right after the residency I did in Germany with Kurt Deerhog.
Okay.
And so it was like I guess that would have been my second year in grad school. And I just went from, being fully functioning to almost no functioning. So instead of doing huge chunks
Uh-huh.
of, like solid cast iron, I started doing more installation work that was utilizing the natural colorants and the weeping of the iron because that's a mordant and it can adjust the colors of natural colorants. And so I was casting like large bobbin type things and wrapping the canvas on it, allowing it to rust out. That was kind of midterm or midpoint show. And then we had COVID. The pandemic immediately shut down. March of 2020, I was in the middle of preparing for my thesis and we got kicked out.
Wow.
So I had just cast my big, large blue jean. I had used all kinds of work pants that I had and, from Mike and a bunch of friends and made like this large casting of like work jeans.
Uh-huh.
And luckily I got that done and everything else had to be moved immediately. So I had got images of that and it was still stuck down there. And I installed in my partner's garage up here in Frederick.
Yeah.
And luckily it went with the vibe.
Yeah.
Again, I was bringing in those like family memories and using the rest print fabric and everything that I was doing sort of as connection, like the hippocampus and the neurons and everything going off into your brain, and using the objects as those terminals. And so it's like I had cast iron pieces, I had blacksmith hammers that had been handed down to me from, teachers and stuff like that, just those memories that were all tied together. And but it was really bad because it was like there was no true culmination. There was no real ending, and everybody just sort of split and went their separate ways. And I don't think I've seen Mike since we left. And we're now trying to collaborate on a project together and stuff. But it was just like my network just poof and was gone.
And that was supposed to be your last year of grad school,
Mm-hmm.
or like your last semester, the spring semester.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. So I have so many questions. I guess you're the first person that I've talked to that has happened
Really.
to. Yeah. I mean,
So,
I've heard of it. I work at a university. So I know people
mm-hmm.
that had that experience, but they're not iron casters. So
Right.
I guess
Yeah.
I guess that's where I'm like blown away by. So you installed this show in your partner's garage. Like, did you Zoom the final
I
critique or?
did. I did sort of like at that time I was doing the Instagram live interviews and stuff. So part of that I did like a live walkthrough, and it had some people come over and, sort of exposed it, but it was all photography based, and it went up live on the university website because we weren't allowed on campus at all. Then it it was just all Zoom, and it just felt, I I think it's bad to have, like, everybody goes through the thesis syndrome or whatever. Like, it feels like postpartum, but I didn't have a child.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then to have all of that on top of it and
Yeah.
not actually get to have the celebration, that send off, or even walk, because we did a YouTube live graduation. And so it was like everything was just
Yeah. Remote and distant.
mhm.
Wow. And then the summer
Yep.
was still COVID was still really bad.
Yep. And I didn't really have any plans. I knew that I was tentatively teaching at Shepherd University. Um, and that did come through. And I
Mhm,
was
mhm.
at that time I was starting to build my graphic design business, and start building the consulting side of things and take on commissions and everything. But it's been a crazy struggle, and I've taken odd jobs here and there because, as you know, with adjuncting, it's like you might be signed for 3 months and then you don't have a job for the next 9 or something like that. So it's been tough, and I, it's worked out.
Good.
I definitely worked myself into a hole a lot, but we have the Delaplane Art Center here in town that's really great to work at. I teach watercolor, ceramics, painting with textiles type classes and stuff there. And I taught back at University of Maryland for a printmaking class. And then I was on that job search. I was like, okay, I got to get out of this adjuncting thing. I've got to, get my feet into sculpture more and stuff like that. And I actually had a job lined up at Micah, and
What
they
is Mike?
call
Can you tell me
Micah is
that?
the Maryland Institute of Contemporary Arts, I think.
Okay.
It's in
Mhm.
Baltimore. But I knew I didn't want to drive like an hour every day.
It's a
And
long commute, yeah.
yeah, and that's not a great part of Baltimore either.
Mhm.
And they called from Shepherd and was like, hey, we need somebody to take over woodshop and sculpture one this semester. I was like, okay, done. I knew it was going to be like a pay cut, but I was like, I haven't taught sculpture yet
Mhm.
at the
Mhm.
college level. And I was like, okay, this has to go on my CV.
Yeah.
It's just done.
You were up
And
for the challenge.
right. And I had back-to-back semesters, and that was fine. And then, at the beginning of this spring,
Yeah.
January of 2022, I was starting that job search again because I didn't know. I signed up for all the summer camps teaching kids.
Mm-hmm. You got to do it. You got to get it out of your system
Yeah.
so that you know it's definitely, because it is for some people. Anyways.
I'm definitely not cut out for that. But I was starting to get worried. I was like, is there going to be any solid jobs? And Riverworks Art Center reached out to me, and they're like, we don't know if you'll fit in as an associate or if you'll be on the board or whatever. We just come talk with us, come hang out. And I went down there for sort of like an impromptu interview, only being like acquaintances with the executive director who had called me. And we knew we were kind of working in the same realm because over the past 2 years, I had been working trying to build creative mindfulness and offer like workshops, sort of art therapy type things, but mixed with gentle movement and meditation and stuff like that. So I was building all of these things, and we had that meeting, and it just everything clicked. Their mission, my mission, all of it just. And I was always so worried about giving up myself. And because I had, those odd jobs, you have to just pick up whatever you have to do. And it sucks your soul. It really does, especially if you're not able to continue making art. And that was what was the most difficult, really. And once we got started talking, they were like, it just all worked out because I'm a graphic designer, social media marketer, like I've done all that for Sloss and multiple different things. And nobody in the area would really give me an opportunity because I didn't have that piece of paper. I didn't, have the training, but I had 8 years of experience.
Yeah.
So, but it's been incredible. Like just being able to work with the other teachers, and there's a sculpture garden there. The founder is he he's a landscape artist, and he is a stone sculptor and everything. So it's just, I can walk out door, we have 2 huskies at the studio, and they hang out with me all day, and I can just take lunch in the garden or whatever. And it's kind of like the perfect spot.
That's awesome. It sounds like a gem of a
Mm-hmm.
place.
So
Yeah.
come see us
I
in
know
Maryland.
I'm very enticed to. So this is where you are right now. Do you want to, so you had already said that you're interested in talking about your favorite place to pour iron. Is it the favorite place you've ever poured iron, or just continues to be the favorite place that you
It's the
like?
most scenic.
Oh, okay. So tell me about it.
Okay, so of course, Sloss, the motherland,
Yeah.
is probably my favorite place to pour iron. But the most scenic place I've ever poured iron, which is a yearly ritual of going to, is the Chesapeake Maritime Museum in St. Michael's, Maryland.
Oh.
They have a boat shop there where they hand build like large ships and stuff. And we pop up one of Christian's furnaces right there, and in the middle of the museum yard, the shipyard, we have an iron pour. So we're right there at water level, and we're just, this nice sort. Usually we do it when it's not too hot, so it's not a tropical breeze, but it's, a nice Chesapeake breeze. We use oyster shells as our flux.
Nice.
So we're
Always
out
nice.
there shucking oysters, eating them, and then just bashing them right there.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. But we actually got to work on a project. I know it's not iron, but it's bronze.
Yeah.
So they were working on a large ship, some old schooner. They brought in live oak, Osage orange, and some South American wood. But they were building that. Christian got the job to do like all of the rudder attachments and stuff, like all the bronze for the old ship. And we actually were able to do a demo pour right there, right next to them working on the wooden part. And, so that was really cool project
What
last summer.
what kind of molds did he use to make?
He made resin bonded sand with CNC routered foam, just the big picks. I can't even talk anymore. The big, thick pink styrofoam, just, glued it together and CNC routed it, but gave enough rooms to ensure with shrinkage and everything. And then they took it to milling and got all the little fine details. But that was a really cool project.
Yeah. So tell me more about this because this is the first I'm hearing of it. So even if you've blasted it on social media, I haven't been like, I'm not always on there. And so I feel like now that I'm part of, doing this, I'm like part of the public face or whatever. I have to be more up and up on all of these. So you said it's a yearly thing that you do.
We call it the pour on the shore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've probably heard that, but you might not have heard the
Yeah.
museum itself. They're actually starting to do some at an old mechanic shop that's in Easton, Maryland, but we still try to have at least one pour at the Maritime Museum because, I mean, who wouldn't? Right there on the
Exactly.
bay, it's
What time
awesome.
of year typically is that?
We've mostly done it in March, right around my birthday.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so is it like a public pour that people can come
Um,
and watch?
it's pretty open.
Uh-huh,
Like,
uh-huh.
well, I mean, we've had news interviewers and, stuff come through, but yeah, we put up barriers and it's right there in the museum grounds. So it's an open air museum. They walk through all the different shops and everything. So they can go through the wood shop and where they bake the canoes and all kinds of stuff. There's a lighthouse out there. And we put up tuba for the furnace.
That's the furnace's name?
Yeah, UMD alumni thought it up, and it's got these huge tubes, and it actually has this like ooh sound that it makes. It's really cool.
That sounds fantastic. So we were talking a little bit about molds, right? Like I was asking about the molds that he used, but so let's talk about you and mold making
Mhm.
because, and you mentioned this, and I remember you getting the award, I think, because I was at Sloss in 2017. So you got the Mold
Mold
Master
Master.
Award.
Yep, I was
So
the final official winner of the Mold Master Award, and the only person known to date to actually do both a resin bonded sand and a green sand mold at the same time, like in the same week.
And so I actually at 2017, I was volunteering in the exhibition space, setting up the
Oh,
exhibitions and
that's
stuff.
fun.
And so I wasn't, and I don't know, like I've never really done the Mold Master. Can you like tell me a little bit about how much you know about the history of it, or like what did you have to go through?
Mhm.
Because by the time I was on the steering committee, that's when I think that the mold subcommittee like changed things
Yeah.
and it's all fine. But can you tell me because I don't know?
Yeah, it is really cool. Originally what the teacup test was old naval testing system to go from like an assistant to a journeyman caster on the
Okay.
ships.
Okay.
So they would typically have aluminum and brass furnaces right there on the ships,
Hmm.
and you were supposed to be able to cast a saucer, a teacup, and some people said it was a spoon on the rim or down inside, and some people even add a sugar cube in it.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was originally signed up for just the resin bonded sand, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to
The
do
resin
both?"
bonded sand part of the competition?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just entered one side because I didn't know I could do both, and so I had actually created my teacup and everything out of wax. It was sort of this, at that time I was doing a lot of elaborate lace designs and stuff on things. So it was a lace teacup and, all kinds of crazy stuff. It even had the spoon had a K on it. But
Oh,
it was,
yeah.
yeah, it was awesome because it cast like, great. That K, it was just like,
Good.
that's perfect. But it was amazing working side by side with Bob and Charlie from the metal.
Mm-hmm. Bob Rogers and Charles Logan.
Yep.
Mm.
And it was a lot of work to like be bouncing between those two, plus like assisting with all the volunteering that I was
Mm-hmm.
doing, but which I
Mm-hmm.
totally don't recommend trying to do all that at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah,
It
absolutely.
was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
But with the molds with green sand, you actually have three flask parts. And you start with the saucer, then you go into the teacup itself, and you have to, once you ram green sand, any undercut or anything, you have to dig out around it and then, put the parting compound on it and then re-ram into it. So you have to dig out around the teacup handle
Oh, wow.
and then
Okay.
put two extra sides in it.
Okay.
You have a piece of dental floss with a knot tied in the end of it, like a little loop. You put that down in the green sand and you take and have a piece of cigarette rolling paper,
Okay. Okay.
like when you hand roll your own cigarettes,
Yeah.
you put that down in there, ram on top of it halfway, put the dental floss in there, ram the rest of the way, let it set. Then all of that helps you assist pulling this little tiny, like almost triangular piece out of both sides of the.
Wow. So did you know green sand mold making before you
I had a
were there?
general idea about it.
Mm-hmm.
We used a lot of Petrobond for parting and
Okay.
stuff. So I was trained by Kevin Shunn. He was part of like Dan Hunt, Ted Urin, and a bunch of the Carbondale, Illinois folks. And
Yeah.
so their mold making techniques are like pristine. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was just how he does green sand is amazing, but I won't gush too much on that. Um, but going in and using that, I had a vague idea, and it just it felt so natural. It was
Mm.
really weird, and they said that I moved so quickly and like precisely with those pieces that
Mm-hmm.
they were surprised watching me take these pieces out. So it was pretty, like I'd always dreamed of winning the Mold Master,
Yeah.
never thinking that it would happen, and it was a really, really nice surprise.
Awesome. So they said, so you were entered in one and they said, hey, why
Mhm.
don't you just compete
Do
in
both of them.
both?
Yeah. And I was the only one that actually completed both of them.
Awesome. Do you still have those castings?
I do.
I bet I was gonna say, I bet you do. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I miss mold making. My goodness. So,
I know. It's been so long. Like I haven't made a mold in since. mm, No, I did make some for Sloss slash the what was the last one? The online one.
29. Oh, okay. Yeah, it
2021.
2021.
Yeah. I was helping Kay Dart out at Shepherd for that big like production, the crazy performance for that we had. And so I did some inclusion molds, but that's really the last time I've had a chance.
What were the inclusions that you
I did cardboard and
okay.
was like trying to make open face books sort of, and so it was like wet cardboard that had been dried and warped,
Okay.
and then I left that in the sand and poured directly into it, and some of it turned out really, really nice. Others were just like parts and pieces, but I kind of like to let things just sort of do their own thing, especially with my inclusion stuff. And I really just love the texture. I was so surprised at how the cardboard turned out because I had not used that material yet as a mold making thing. It was just so cool.
Awesome. And so then are those gonna, have you completed pieces or are they
I
components?
haven't yet. They're going to be components for some of my larger mixed media collage pieces that
Uh-huh.
rust out on
Oh,
fabric. So,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good use for them. So do you want to, so it sounds like that's hot on your horizon, but do you want to talk about anything else that's hot on the horizon?
Oh,
And
yeah.
this can be like immediate, but it can also be as far forward as you want to talk about.
I don't think I'm thinking much past next spring.
And that's understandable.
Yeah.
That's totally understandable.
Um, so right now I am wrapping up a large bronze casting project that I've been working on. And really it's went from a 4-month project turned into a year-long project, but I am very thankful to be coming to the end of it. I'm I've started learning to delegate tasks. So I'm actually dropping it off at the sandblaster for a final finishing before I do the patination and stuff next week. So I'm really
Nice.
excited. And I am moving into a new project that's been on the horizon for a while. It's a retired NFL football player is wanting to do a public sculpture piece. And so I've been hired to sort of lead that and everything. So me and Mike are collaborating on that. And thank
Congratulations
you.
on that.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty excited about it. It's a little out of my normal realm because it's these the last two projects have been humanoid and I don't typically do that. So it's expanding how I view art, I guess. And then the next big iron pour that's on the horizon is Steel Weekend at Bethlehem Steel, the National Museum of Industrial History in Bethlehem, right there at the steel stacks and everything. Richard Serra actually worked there when he was in high school. Come to find out. So it's like having that connection. But every year in October, they have a big um, steel workers reunion. And so the last time they poured iron there was in 1997. And we brought it back last fall and actually had iron flowing in Bethlehem again. So it took that long, but
I
we're
think I
getting it
saw that
started.
on social media. I
Yeah.
think so.
We had another pour in April, just, testing out and I think it was Jay, some of the Carry Furnace crew came out and we, had a demonstration pour, but we're doing another one in October for the steel workers reunion.
Is that a private event just for the Steelworkers Union or is it?
It's not.
Okay.
If you're interested in doing it, Katie Hovenkamp is heading it up.
Okay.
I think we're using Alyssa Imes's furnace Phyllis. Um, y'all might remember that from Sloss, but yeah, we usually trade out furnaces. We're looking to build one, which actually be the first one that I physically have built. I've designed many and I've rammed so many I can't remember at
Yeah.
this point, but I've never actually physically made a furnace. And so that's like, it's time.
Yeah. Yeah. If you feel like, and most of these things, if you feel like it's time, then it is time. Like I was like, it's probably time for me to take a ceramic shell mold workshop just to like dip my pinky toe in. But anyways, but
And then you know what the next one is, right? Dung
is it
mold.
slot? Is it what? Say that
Dung
again.
dung mold.
Oh,
Becca
oh, the
Becca
next one
Fliss.
for me. I thought you meant like, and then you know what the next big iron pour is. And I was like, yeah, duh, Sloss. No.
Floss.
Oh, my next
Yeah.
experimental
You have
mold
to
will
get your
be
hands really
uh,
dirty with dung mold.
I guess that's on my bucket list now. I'll write it
Do it.
down. Where can you do that? Like, where is there? I feel like Wayne Potraz has taught that.
Yeah, I think he's done that. I would love to take one of his smelting workshops,
Yeah.
because like that Viking, the whole like the history of it just intrigues me so much.
Oh
But
yeah.
Becca Fliss, she is the predominant teacher that I know, at least on the East Coast, because a lot of people have allergies to these chemicals. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's why I wear respirators now when pouring, because like Stinky Pinky and some of the Novacet and those, they make me physically ill and I can't complete pours.
Yeah.
So she it the ceramic shell actually breaks her out a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a respiratory thing too. So she started researching these traditional, um they date back to like Egypt, and there was a traditional gold casting technique. And
Oh,
so I got to work with her at Salem Artworks, and she normally teaches them at Sloss too.
okay. I'll look out for that. Oh man. Great. No, I think the more I talk to different people, the more I'm realizing there's so much that I don't know. And it's like kind of overwhelming.
Oh yeah.
But oh my gosh.
and,
So,
and we each have to find our own, like,
yeah.
it's good to try and dabble, but once you find what you really like, that's what's really important.
Yeah. And it helps drive the passion and keep you engaged.
Yep.
Let's see. So we've been going for like probably about an hour. Do you want to talk about any more of these like oh, your advice? I was gonna like try and drag in another question, but
Yeah.
and oh well also I just maybe let's just touch on why iron.
Why iron?
Yeah.
There's something primal about it. I mean, we all have iron flowing through our veins. And it connects us to, the outer universe and like the stars and everything too. But I mean, besides being a pyromaniac, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, that in itself is a good reason.
Yeah, and getting to wear really cool leathers with
Yeah.
whatever patches I want to put on them,
Yeah.
why not, right? I think it's community. I really do. I think that's what keeps me coming back over and over again. And it's not easy work, but it is fulfilling. Even if, a mold miscast or completely explodes, something goes wrong, it works out. And, if you're injured, heaven forbid, you get severely injured or whatever, you see such camaraderie and community. People that you might have never spoken to, you might be too nervous to speak to, they come running over, and they're putting your hair out, or they're pulling your leather jacket off and making sure the steam burn isn't too bad and stuff like that. And it's just amazing, the community that we have, and the lasting relationships you build from that too.
Yeah, there's something about the the I don't know how to say it, like the relationships that we build in the on the pour floor, but even just working up to
Oh yeah.
the the moment of the iron pour and then the celebration afterwards.
Yeah,
And
that's the
then
fun part.
and there's something about this community that I can not see somebody for years, especially
Oh
after
yeah.
just being through the pandemic, and then I see them and it's like we pick up right where we left off. It's like
Absolutely.
everything, is a lot has happened to a lot of
Yeah.
people since I've seen them last, but they're still some of my best friends.
Mhm.
And yeah. And
Yep. And these people see the worst sides of us.
oh yeah.
Not only are we dirty, We might not have bathed for how many days, especially at sculpture trails. I don't know how
Yeah.
y'all do that.
Or Sloss, man, I
Yeah.
remember going to Sloss before they started paying extra for those little shower trailers. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, and that it was you're right. It's like because then it's you maybe pour on a furnace with your crew or whatever, and then it's the exhibition
Mhm.
opening, and
Yep.
it's like
You're
whatever.
grubby, you have your foundry boots on, whatever, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. And I mean, and then we have the attitude flares and,
Yeah.
the frustration that comes out too, but we all understand, we know, and that's family.
Yeah.
When you can pick up and continue a relationship after being cussed out or,
Mhm.
whatever, it's
Mhm.
huge.
Mhm. And a lot of times it's not personal. It's just like
Right.
in the heat of the moment and frustration or heat exhaustion. And then you make
Yep.
up afterwards.
That's when you go out and have a couple with your friends or whatever. Eat
It's
some pizza.
it's funny. So we're talking about like this is totally like a side tangent. I don't even know if I'll leave this in, but so I was at Trails for Fire at Night. So I've
Uh-huh.
never been an intern at Trails. I just have visited for Fire at Night twice. And the I'm interested I'm interested to see your reaction like as soon as I say this. So the fashion, the iron pour fashion is
It's
like
incredible.
no other I don't know, it's like I go to sculpture trails and I'll see like a bunch of people and I can tell who obviously like I can kind of tell who's an intern and they're all wearing the shirts and
Right.
things, but there will be iron casters there that are like me. They're for the event kind of more as a pilgrimage. Like we're not
Right.
tourists, you
Yeah.
know, we're part of the family, but it's like the shoes, the pants, the shirts, if it happens to be a Sloss shirt or if it happens to be like a school shirt from their like sculpture club or
Yep.
like whatever. And yeah, it's like I could kind of pick out and that's one of the things I look forward to at Sloss is like seeing all the old t-shirts and seeing how
Mhm.
everybody either the customize them or you talked about the leathers and the patches and how like that's one of the interesting things about pouring with people that I've never poured with before is to
Mhm.
see like how are they decked out.
Yep.
So much fun.
Mhm. And then a lot of us get hand-me-downs too. Like my spats are still hand-me-downs from Kevin and, like a helmet I think I don't know, I got it from Sloss a million years ago and, they're like, "Here, just have this." I was like, "Fun, fine."
Yeah.
And it's just, it's really cool how we all bring our personality to how we show up and decorate everything.
Yeah. It like, yeah, it's like, I mean, a lot of us are artists too. So I feel like that artisticness and customization comes kind of like
Mhm.
from this like art vein that we're all from, I guess.
Yep.
Um, so I was thinking about now maybe let's hear some advice.
Advice. Don't get burned. First rule in the foundry is don't put your knees down. Everything's hot. Just think that. I think we got that covered though. Take care of yourself is the major thing. We only have this one body and it catches up with you. I know I'm not the only one that has had back injuries and, you know, everything that's went with it, but, putting in a little prep work, you know, conditioning your body. I like to tell my students, this is an athletic sport almost. It's not just something that you can weekend warrior through. You can try, but it's really something that if you are planning to have a sustainable practice and maintain it for a long time, not just 3 or 4 years, you have to train. You have to have different skills in place. I've had to go to physical therapy multiple rounds I went from just a regular occupational one that totally didn't work because I was busting all of their bands and, nothing was heavy enough for me. So
Yeah,
it wasn't
yeah.
really working, to finding an athletic physical therapist. And last year we did sort of a collaboration thing where he did a Zoom call and stuff like that. So there's people out there that understand, they don't understand, but they know how the muscles function. And so, like, if you have elbow issues and, like tendonitis and stuff, there are ways to reverse some of the damage. And, just occasionally, having a salad or, trying to eat a little bit better, because if you're not taking care of your body, you're not going to be able to show up every single time. And that's my advice.
That advice hits really close home for me. A lot of things that even though I don't pour iron every single weekend, I'm not a foundry manager or even teach at a school that has iron, or like all of those like wonderful opportunities that people have. Like, I don't have that, but I still think about, what am I doing to get ready for, I feel like I may have even before the pour at trails, like done some little like upward dog, downward dog, like kind of just limbering up,
Mhm.
because I think that that point that you brought up about, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but when you said it, a bell kind of went off, as it was like the longevity of your
Mhm.
practice, or is that how you said it?
Yeah. The sustainability.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's something that is talked about a lot, but it's
Not.
kind of like, we want to be able to be making art for a long time. So keeping that in mind and doing,
Mhm.
like you said, training, maybe lifting weights, being limber, working on injuries that
Mhm.
for are from other, mishaps, that maybe, so that that way when you're on the pour floor, the every 6 months or something.
And not trying to, we call it around here, don't be a Viking. You don't have to push through. There are people you can delegate to, there are people that you can hand off. If something's too heavy, don't force yourself and potentially harm other people and yourself in the process, when you just don't have to be hard-headed.
And you can have a spotter waiting for
Mhm.
you, and you can, or, just, okay, well, I a lot at sculpture trails when I was there, they would say, okay, I just need help when the ladle is full, getting it over to like the skimmer. And then after a couple of molds, they'd be like, okay, I'm good from here.
Mhm.
And then you just step away. And that's like, I think a great system and a
Yeah.
great way to like kind of share the load, because as a spotter, you're not physically exerting yourself as much as
Right.
actually like driving or being dead end, but it's helping them out until
Mhm.
the ladle gets a little bit lower, and then they can
For
handle it from
sure.
there.
And it makes it more accessible to all body types, because not everybody is able to lift 150, 200 pounds, no problem. And especially like when I was first starting, we didn't have the fiber ceramic shell ladles. It was, you were lifting, blue ram in metal shanks and, like heavy stuff. The ladle itself was, a good 7,500 pounds without the iron in it.
Yeah.
So it was, getting used to that and, finding stances so you're not like completely, that's one of the things that I'm going to start moving into more, is like movement for makers. and like how to keep from hunching over like while you're working on your waxes or your molds, and how to really stand and lift, because that was never talked about that much. I mean, once I got to college, and people with injuries and stuff sort of took you to the side and was like, here, you might want to try this or you're going to screw up your back. um but that's that, and the sustainability of your practice in general as an artist, that's a major lacking in the academic system. Like, they show you the skills, they and to an extent they tell you how to write about your art and sort of exhibit your art, but they don't talk about how to really make a life as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people out there like Cynthia Handel, and there's so many that are doing it. Like, you see they have a really good work-life balance. They're also teaching, they're exhibiting really well. Coral Lambert, Kurt Deerhawk, like all of them, really, really good. And you start analyzing how or what that secret is. And it all comes down to living in alignment with what you want and what fills your cup, rather than checking other people's boxes or doing the things that you're supposed to.
Yeah. And I think that to this same point, I think I left grad school and I was under this impression I had the preconceived notion that I was going to continue producing artwork as intensely and like as
Yeah.
much as I had been in school. And so I had a residency. So I started off with that at that pace, and then within a year quickly kind of burnt myself out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also was doing a lot of what you were talking about, this like run around the adjunct hustle and driving way too much.
Oh yeah.
Nobody's giving you health insurance. Nobody's paying for your gas mileage, which it's like my full-time job with benefits now doesn't pay for my gas. So, but it's like I just drive to work and home,
Right.
not from one community college to then the craft center. And then
You're at some place different every day, or 3 or 4 times a day. You're somewhere new. It's ridiculous.
eating in your car in between different gigs.
Mm-hmm.
And then like that's kind of like one of the things that made me realize I had to stop doing that line of work, or like that
Yeah.
category of work. I was like, I have to get a full-time job because I haven't made artwork
Mm-hmm.
in, I think it was like 2 years, because I was trying to survive as an artist
Right.
with all of these like artists, like part-time teaching jobs. And I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
actually building my portfolio, which then kind of made me not have a portfolio for
And it
full
makes you
time.
very unhappy.
It makes you unhappy. And then also it was like nobody would look at me for like a teaching job because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a portfolio, and I wasn't showing in exhibitions because I didn't have time because I was too
Yeah.
busy adjuncting at 2 different college. Like it was just, and it was like, oh, this isn't healthy. This isn't
Mm-hmm.
like doesn't have my best holistic health in mind. And so then
Yeah.
getting the full-time job and being able to calm down and slowly ramp back into making artwork, it's been a huge learning
Mm-hmm.
curve. So yeah, I feel like that's something that maybe we should like we as a community should talk
Mm-hmm.
about more.
Yeah.
Um,
Because and especially when you go from having facilities that have mullers, and the resin bonded sand chemicals are available, like, to an extent there's some people that give you the trade secrets, or you might have the forethought to prepare and be like, where can I source this stuff when it's no longer provided for me? Having that knowledge and like being able to mix it with just a welded piece of metal on the end of a drill in a 5-gallon bucket in your garage and then ram, like, it's a totally different world. Like, are you going to be the person that just completely quits, or are you going to continue? And, like planning ahead and sort of knowing what you need to do in those cases is huge.
And also, I mean, there are resources at conferences, but
Hmm.
also, yeah, maybe we should put together a panel of like how to mix sand in your garage or something like that, because it's like so there was like,
You you don't want play sand. It has too much mica in it. Just FYI.
I mean, these are things that, I mean, I think that lots of people do know them, but it's like, are we making these resources available? That's to like the inquiry, like, are we promoting it, because I didn't know. And so my husband is actually like ceramicist, or he works as a ceramic studio tech. And so he was the one that actually did the research on the sand for me, because I didn't, because you're right. Like at school,
Mhm.
it was just like, this is the sand that we use. And I remember it was always washed and dried. You want washed and dried sand. And I was like, oh, okay. But then I get out in the real world and I don't, I guess, like,
Are you
know
going
what
to
the,
the air gas company, or what kind of silicon bronze rod was I using to TIG
yeah,
with?
yeah. And, and also I think that to be kind with yourself too, because like I got a sand. So I had been to enough conferences where I went to grad school and they had a muller. And so I didn't know how to mix sand in a cement mixer.
Mhm,
But then I went to enough conferences and saw and experienced, like at the metal museum, they mix with cement mixers.
mhm.
And so I thought, oh, okay, I gotta get one of those. And so that was one of my birthday present from my father-in-law, actually, was this bright, shiny orange cement mixer from Harbor
Nice.
Freight. And then it took me 3 years to take it out of the box and set it up.
I feel that.
And then it took me a year to actually mix sand. Like, cause it was like the moment where I was like, it's my birthday. I don't want to do anything besides set up this cement mixer, because I
Yeah.
had finally got my hands on some chemistry that had been gifted to me. And so I was like, okay, I have the chemistry. I got some sand. Like my husband helped me figure out the sand from his like ceramic background, like how to get nice sand. And then I set it up, but then I didn't have, and it was the pandemic though. Actually, I set it up on my birthday during the pandemic, which is in March. So it was,
Mhm.
but it was March of 2021. So it was still pretty bad out there in COVID. But then it took me another year to actually ram it. And like, let me tell you, that was a huge, I was so happy to finally have had that, you know, come through. But
Oh, I'm
I
sure.
think that in grad school, even in like all throughout my whole like college education, everything seemed like everybody just did everything so fast.
Mhm.
And then now, even now, like doing these interviews, like I'm actually like finally accepting the fact that when people talk about their careers, especially the people we look up to, they have years, like maybe 5 years to do three pieces in a body of work. And
Mhm.
that's fine. But I feel
Yeah.
like in grad school, it's like, no, for every single 3 credit class, you make 3 pieces of art and you're taking 4 classes. Like it's just like you produce
Mhm.
so much in school.
And you're expecting to maintain that same, like, oh, I can throw out a body of a series of work within 3 months.
Yeah. Or
And then
like,
you forget that you're not pausing enough to allow your brain to actually like work and find a
process. Yeah.
still moment to actually create these things. And that is something that, it's a mind fuck, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And it's like a shift. I had to, because then when I wasn't producing, because I was just struggling to pay my bills, to pay back the student loans,
Mhm.
um, my self-worth, like I felt like
Oh,
it just like my
100%.
self-esteem took a huge dive because I didn't think like, oh, but when I was in school, that was my job, was to make art, to wake up, make art for these critiques, for these bodies of work, for the MFA show. It's like now my job is like a 9 to 5 installing artwork for some curator, and that's great. But I also like get home from work after being up and down on 10-foot ladders. Yeah. And it's like, great. Now I'm going to go grind my castings in the garage with like bugs flying in my face because of the lights on in the garage. Like, it's just like, so to be able to realize like it's going to be slower, but that's okay. That doesn't mean that I'm worth any less. That was a huge shift that I had to like realize. And I don't know, it's just like interesting to think about now and like talk to other people about, because it's like a lot of us go through the same thing. But
it's like you have the rug jerked out from under you, and you're just like sent out, you're pushed out of the nest.
And like in some ways it's good. Like, I mean, there's some ways that it's like, oh, this is the real world. But in other ways, it's like, where's the support system? And so that's where I think that like the iron communities, friends that I built the friend system that I built in grad school with the iron casting have been my solid, people that I can rely on, lean back on. I mean, it's like everybody coming and wanting to be on this podcast. Like, I mean, that's amazing that people are supporting me and wanting to be interviewed and wanting to be like put out there, just like spotlighted. That's amazing. And so I'm like so grateful. So
yeah, I mean, it's amazing that you are providing this. Like Stacey Holloway with the iron casting Bible thing that she did,
the letters,
the letters, and like these moments are so special. And like a lot of us don't know each other's background and stories, unless you've been on that same journey with them, or you've become really close. You don't get to hear all of the backstory, and it's really cool. I appreciate that you're documenting all of this, and it's great.
Thank you. I've actually kind of become addicted. I talked about it with Rob Nolan in the last episode. I don't know if it's like going to be in the actual show. No, it's not, because I think it was like after we were done recording the after show. But I am so addicted to learning about people's journeys now that when I was at Trails, I had to stop myself from like asking people in person, because I was like, no, save it for the show. I have to wait because it's so much more interesting to me if I'm learning it. Like, it's just so much more exciting.
Yeah, it's like a surprise. You're learning about it at the same time.
So I love it. It's been so rewarding, and I'm excited to keep going. But yeah, like I talked to you before, I'm trying to figure out a way to do it a little bit more sustainably, because right now I'm kind of like, as of now, I started in May, and I'm like, I am running on fumes. So we're just going to try and restructure how I actually do the production and the editing and everything, and hopefully just have it like I said, more sustainable, so that I can keep on thinking about the long game, and the longevity of the project, because I really just want it to keep going. Like, I have people that will say, oh, I'm so busy, I can't be interviewed right now. And I get the feeling that they're taking it as like a more immediate. I'm like, no. This is an eternal invitation.
Yeah.
Like it could be, if your life slows down in a year from now, we'll chat then. And so that's like one thing that it's like, I'm not planning on just stopping. And I also, people that are not in the community are like, oh, so you're still doing that? Like, aren't you going to run out of people?
No, not anytime soon.
No. And it's like, also every year new people get introduced to iron, and like, just, it's exciting to me that once they get introduced to iron, then they have this as a resource to really study like what they can about us contemporaries or even the history and like learning about, like there's things that I'm learning about that I feel like dumb. Like, how did I not know that? So, and I feel like, so you're in like different circles than I typically run in.
Because
And
you're
so
more mid-south, right?
now, yeah. And so learning about all of these, like the pour that you were talking about at the shipyard, like I didn't know anything about that. And so it's really exciting. And so I eventually want to like, I just eventually want to know everything. No, I just want to know as much as I can, more and more every day.
Yep.
So
For sure.
well, let's close it off for the public show. So Lauren, thank you so much for letting me interview you and kind of ask you all these questions about your work and your life. I really, really appreciated getting this view into what you're doing right now and kind of your past and everything.
You're very welcome. It was great to be on. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. So that's it for this part of the show. And so if you want to go on over to the after show, we'd love to have you come on and over and listen to all these little secret tidbits that I'm going to listen to right now. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. During this conversation with Lauren, I was so inspired by her fortitude and drive to achieve any goal that she sets her sights on. In her art and in her career, she works tirelessly to stretch and expand boundaries. And this is clearly demonstrated by her explorations in printing with iron rust, but also in how she is thriving as she chooses to define her own terms within her day job and career. Lauren, thank you for taking the time to share your story with me. I am so fascinated by your vibrance and your positive appetite for living life. You have accomplished so much in your young years. And please don't be offended when I say in your young years, because I get it. Like, I'm young too, but whatever. Seriously, the point I'm trying to make is that you've already accomplished so much. And in looking forward, there's nothing you can't do. I, for one, am so excited to see what else you set your sights on, because I know you will blow it out of the water. If you're interested in following Lauren on Instagram, her handle is lace.anvil_LGKart, but also visit her website, which is laurengkoch.com. And for one last word of thanks to our top supporter, Sloss Metal Arts, as well as our other supporters on Patreon. The funds that you support me with are invaluable to help me continue to produce these episodes. If you would like access to all the after shows for as little as $1 a month, go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/podcastiron. There you can choose a contribution level that fits within your budget. But supporters at any level get access to the after show from each episode. And by now, you already probably know that it's an extra 15 to 20 minutes with the show's guest, where we talk a little more candidly and share at least one more story. But if you don't have it in your budget right now to support the Podcast Iron on Patreon, that's okay. Instead, if you could share this podcast with someone you think would be interested in listening or watching, I'll appreciate that just as much. Anything and everything helps, and for that I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you happen to be watching this show on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the Podcast Iron channel. This way you can set up notifications for when each episode goes live, but also I'm working towards 100 subscribers because reaching that milestone will allow me to change the channel URL from a random arrangement of numbers and letters that I've been assigned to a more personal URL. And I would love to have the website address for the YouTube channel to be youtube.com/podcastiron. So for those of you who have subscribed already, thank you for helping me make this dream a reality. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.